Good afternoon. My name is Patty.M.Coralles, and I'm a former ICE attorney with the Department of Homeland Security, and we're here today to talk about the consideration of deferred action for childhood arrivals. Today with me, I am happy to have my colleague, Cynthia Carrasco. Cynthia, welcome.
Thank you so much, Patty, for having me.
Would you be so kind to introduce yourself to the folks here?
Absolutely. I actually am from the area. I was born and raised in Pasadena, California. I'm an attorney. And to find more about me, you can visit my website at cynthia.nataliecarrasco.com. I practice immigration law as well as family law and some interesting criminal defense matters if it arises. But I've been a lawyer for 6 years now.
Fantastic. I really want to thank you today for being with me so we can discuss deferred action. It's been about 2 weeks now since Department of Homeland Security opened up the application process, and now we can talk about what we've been seeing in our clients that have come to us, or in community organizations that we've gone to volunteer our time. What are the pitfalls that we're noticing in these deferred action applications? And I'd like to talk about that today with you, if I can. I've got an application here in front of me, and one of the things that I've been seeing, and I don't know if you agree with this, Cynthia, is a lot of these young kids don't understand that the place of residence, which it asks in the application, I think it's part 2 of the application specifically says country of residence. And many of these young kids don't know what that means. Does that mean the place of residence where they lived before it came to the United States, or does it mean the United States? And so I want to make it clear that it means the United States,
right,
because you're living in the United States. Would you agree?
Absolutely. That's one of the strangest questions that they've seen. And they say, well, my home has been here. And I said, well, then you reside here. And the definition of a use of residence will be where you make your home and all your livelihood, or the main where you are with your family. So yes, it is the United States of America.
Are there any other things that you've been seeing lately that we should alert the folks to, that maybe, I know that USCIS came out with some additional tips on looking at these applications and processing these applications before you actually mail them for submission. What are other things that you want to, focus on, that you want to let the public know about?
Well, first and foremost, I wanted to make everyone aware of the fact that these applications are free, downloadable from the U.S. website. You don't need to pay for an application, and I definitely don't want anyone going to notary publics or notarios in different Latin communities to get copies of these. You can access them for free. Additionally, you and I are both immigration attorneys. You know that we charge for our services. However, there are nonprofit organizations and community-based organizations that are putting together these wonderful forums and help during the weekends or weekdays by appointment to get some assistance, again, for free. Lastly, I think what's really key is that there's also a way to get a waiver of the fees that are associated with this really important application, and that those qualify for certain individuals of different backgrounds. So you have to make sure that you research everything. And remember, the website is in English and in Spanish, and you can definitely learn, but if you have any questions, to call an attorney. And the one thing that I would say to anyone considering this is just to take your time. Get it in, but make sure you get it in with everything that's properly prepared.
I agree with you on that note. There's such anxiousness, if you will, to get this application in, and it could be because of other news reports about what may or may not happen to this application, if there's a different president,
naturally,
or a potential lawsuit, things like that. But as I tell my clients, as I tell the people who come to me to talk about whether or not they're eligible for this program, is do it right, and do it right once. And
Precisely.
That means take your time. Make sure you have all the documentation to show that and establish that you've been in the United States for a period of 5 years, the requisite period being June 15, 2007 through June 15, 2012, or to the present time. Make sure that you have the information or documentation relating to your education, documentation relating to the fact that you were present in the United States on the date that they announced this particular policy. So getting the information is absolutely crucial, and whether it takes you a week or it takes you 2 months to get all this documentation together, that is going to be beneficial to the applicant.
Right, and I've also seen people getting just so excited that they're willing to send their originals, so their original diplomas or original background information. Don't send your originals.
What a good point.
Send your copies, make sure that they're clear and crisp, and that you have your own backup, because if you spend so much time putting together your evidence of your residence in this beautiful country, then you want to make sure you can recreate that should anything happen. And the other thing that's interesting is that if, for instance, you have a birth certificate that you can't find and you have to call a home country familial member, then make the effort. But if you really can't allocate the energy to make sure that that's done properly, there are affidavits that can be submitted to show, or other ways of proving these documents. So you have to just make sure you talk to legal counsel and also figure out other ways of proving that evidence that shows that you're capable of fulfilling what the requirements are for this amazing program.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things you just touched upon is the originals. I've seen so many people give me the original documents,
Right.
and I want to say to them, that's lovely, that's wonderful. You never submit originals. You keep copies, you submit copies, and you keep copies for yourself.
Right.
Always keep copies for your own records. Now, interestingly enough, you talked about organizations that are out there that can help people to do this at a low cost or no cost at all. CHIRLA is one of those organizations. We also have Public Counsel, who's also doing a lot of these forums for individuals who cannot, if you will, afford what it would cost to go to a private attorney.
Precisely.
I do recommend, however, that the individuals who are interested in applying for this particular program, that they do see some sort of legal counsel to make sure that the application has been filled out appropriately, because there's a lot of
Right.
pitfalls to this application. I mean, if you're not versed in English, if you don't have the education, you may not read the question in a way that is asking you, and you might
Right.
answer it incorrectly.
There are legal impacts of every single question, and when you fill out any federal forms for these types of permits or applications for visas, you're under penalty of perjury. So everything must be done with the knowledge that you're submitting a legal testimony to the federal government. And you're precisely correct. If you're witnessing this with an attorney at a nonprofit or with yourself or myself at our private law firms, you need to make sure that you have the full understanding as to the impact of this form.
And precisely. And I want to ask, let's clarify one of the questions that comes up a lot. And that's the question relating to current educational status. What I've been seeing is that a lot of individuals do have their high school degree, but they're also attending college. And so they don't know which one to put. And the question is not precisely worded, so
Right.
clearly. So my recommendation is, one, always see an attorney if you can, or a counsel. But if you're attending college today, then that's the information you put. And then there's another section, I think it's section 19, where it tells you ask the applicant whether they've obtained a high school degree. That's where you can indicate that you're a high school graduate.
Right.
And then if you're going to college, you can indicate that on question 18 that you continue to go to college.
Right, and I've also seen people who have been hit by the economic downturn who may have started college, but then they can't afford it anymore, and so they have partial credits. You should still disclose that as well, that you still only have a high school diploma, but you completed X amount of credits at a local community college, and that's going to serve in good faith to show your willingness to be a meaningful member of society here, and that's going to be beneficial to you to also disclose.
Absolutely, and also it shows residence as well.
Precisely.
Okay. So another question I see that has become, problematic is, and we should discuss this a little bit, and that is the question relating to arrest and charges. It's question 1 on part 3 of the application. I've had, at least in the last 2 weeks, I want to say a dozen kids come in and who have had juvenile delinquency, who've been charged as juvenile delinquents. So they have not been charged as adults. They have not been arrested or nor convicted. Do juvenile delinquency petitions count?
Yes, they do.
And what's your recommendation in answering that question?
My recommendation is the following, and you and I have discussed this, in legal forums outside of this show. It's important for them to fully disclose what they are and what they've accomplished in this country. Now, under the law, juvenile delinquency matters are always going to be sealed after you've reached a certain age. So that shows a level of understanding that you were less than mature when you were undertaking certain acts. And that will be taken into consideration with the federal government as they pursue this application and your status. However, you should still disclose everything to allow them to understand your background. And quite honestly, if you look at the criminal requirements there, any misdemeanors, which aren't even traffic, are considered serious. So it is still up to the individual to understand that The federal government wants to see you succeed. They want to make sure you are going to have an opportunity to thrive here, but you definitely must disclose that because it doesn't meet the count of misdemeanor as an adult, as the question asks, but it's still something relevant to the application as a whole. And for myself, I have been advising clients to make sure that we put that forward. But again, we're also asking for recommendations and other character witness testimony that is written in form to support this individual making a true, right path in life and wanting to have the status to be able to work and have a really strong life here.
And I agree with you. I myself also am making that recommendation that even if you were a young man or a young lady when something happened to you and you were charged in the juvenile courts and not in the adult courts, still disclose that, still come forward with that information. It only shows that you're willing to be honest, you're willing to be forthright, because you really desire to be in this great country and to be part of this great country. And so there is a place where you can disclose that information at the very end of the application, and you can explain what happened. And often the juvenile delinquency issues that I've encountered are, they got caught up in the moment and they stole a pair of jeans at a store. Okay. You should still disclose that on the additional information section on the I-821D, and indicate that it was a juvenile delinquency and not an adult conviction. But by doing so, you come across forthright, you come across honest. And that's what the federal government's looking for.
Right, and I think it's important to note as well, though, that if there is a series of missteps or mistakes that have now since past your 18th birthday, then that's actually going to be a detriment to your application. So for instance, if you look at where it says the traffic misdemeanors or the traffic violations, those are things that if you have, let's say 10 times have been caught with driving without a license, that's going to show that you don't necessarily understand what it is to be a contributing member of society. So please be aware. From this point on, if you are looking to make this an opportunity for yourself, I would highly advise everyone to follow the law from this point on and try to make a good faith effort to display that commitment, because ultimately, and you know this with your career with ICE, that we are really looking to welcome all citizens of the world and make a society that is reflective of the diversity we seek.
Yes. Yes, and we want to make sure that people succeed in this country.
Precisely.
Now, I do want to touch upon one thing, and that is one of the things I've been seeing is that with such good hearts, these people come with their one piece of paper showing that they graduated from high school, or one piece of paper that they were here in 2009, or one piece of paper that shows that they were here in 2010 and 11. That is not going to be enough. You have to establish a continuous residence for that requisite period of time. And so that means getting all the documents you have, particularly documents that have dates on them. That is very relevant. That shows that you were here in the United States at the time that you were required to be. So if you had a child since coming to the United States, your child's birth certificate, your child's immunization records, your child's medical history, the fact that you went to the hospital to have that child, all that documentation is relevant on your application because it establishes that you were here.
I have met some teen parents in this process, and yes, proving that you have an American-born child and being involved in that child's life is truly relevant. Also, I've been asking for simple things such as good attendance awards, good reading awards, things that show that you were present and active and engaged. And I've also even advised people to start considering volunteering in their community to show, again, that commitment. Maybe you weren't necessarily so involved prior, but that might be something of benefit. The most interesting thing that I think I've really discovered through this has been, though, when people are asked, where did you transfer over into this country? How did you make that crossing of the border?
Right.
And some people don't know the answer. They
That's
haven't
true.
had that hard conversation with their family as to, when I was an infant, how did I come to be in the United States? And so it's a very important time for all of us to really think about the impacts of our family stories. And if you don't know those hard answers, then this is the moment where we have to really be forthright with one another and express how it is we came to this country, and then be ready to put that on the application, because there is a point of entry question, and you will have to disclose which of the 50 states, well, the contiguous states, that you were able to come into to establish your residence.
What an excellent point, because you're absolutely right. So many of the young men and women that I've met, so many of the people who are seeking to apply for this protection that deferred action stands for, if you will, the need, the feeling safe for at least 2 years that they're not going to be deported. They don't know how they entered the country.
Right.
Some do and some don't, but it is crucial for you to sit down with your parents and figure out how is it that you were brought, even if you were little. Your parents know your story, so sit down with your family members and talk to them. I do, before we close, I do want to talk about one aspect of this application, this policy, and that is, many people are so excited about the deferred action program because it gives them the ability to try to get a driver's license.
Right.
If they are accorded employment authorization by the Department of Homeland Security through the deferred action process, then they can take their employment authorization and try to obtain a driver's license here in the state of California, and as well as a Social Security card. And for many people, the benefit of being able to drive to any place, to their work, to college, anywhere, without the threat of not having a license is so powerful. It means so much to them, right? And what I want to make certain we convey today is that we want this for them. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be able to get a driver's license.
Precisely.
And so, the first question I get when people come to talk to me about their deferred action application is, when or how soon can I get my driver's license? And I want to just make it clear, and please, Cynthia, if you can add to this, that once you apply for deferred action, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to obtain an employment authorization. You have to request employment authorization. You have to advise the Department of Homeland Security why it is you need employment authorization. If you are accorded employment authorization, then you take that authorization and you go to a state agency. That state agency may or may not give you a driver's license. Although there has been a recent bill that has been passed, or is being put forth, if you will, proposed, where if anyone who's been accorded deferred action status would be permitted to get a driver's license in the state of California. Can you share your thoughts on this issue?
Sure, and I'm going to be blunt. Obviously, we're friends and colleagues. The reality of it is that we operate differently within the 50 states. Each state has its own state constitution and the way that it manages its government business. At the federal level, obviously, we have a federal mandate. This advice that we're offering today under deferred action is just clarification on how the feds will be able to implement this executive order. So each state will have its own way of offering the privilege, as they call it, to drive within their states, and have that opportunity here in California should the governor sign that bill. But remember, it's political in nature, because when you're giving individuals who don't have lawful status, this is only a temporary work visa, who don't have lawful status, there may be people on the other side of the aisle who say, well, that's giving people special treatment who don't necessarily have a right to also go on the roads next to everyone else who is following the law. So it's very political in nature. It doesn't make sense all the time, and as a lawyer, I find myself perplexed many days. But at the same time, I highly encourage every single person who qualifies under deferred action to apply, because there are power in numbers. And the more folks who actually put forth their story and apply for this benefit will be able to push forward comprehensive immigration reform. And in my humble opinion, I think if we have the ability to show in numbers this roster of individuals who are willing to contribute meaningfully to the United States, that we will be able to move this forward. So it won't be necessarily just a 2-year visa, but potentially we'll be able to really move things along so that all of us can have an opportunity to thrive in this country. And as you know, we're both daughters of immigrants.
Yes.
We both have benefited in ways that we never could have imagined. And we have been privileged enough to have been educated at a level that really it's incumbent upon us to give back. So I want to encourage everyone from the bottom of my heart, apply. There are going to be opportunities in different states based on the governments as we go forward, and obviously political parties, but you must maintain your focus on that. And lastly, if you have any American citizens in your home who are not registered to vote, I highly encourage you to tell them, I don't have that status, will you please speak up and make your voice heard? Because the vote, the power of the vote as well, will be able to push forward agenda and policy immigration that is really more reasonable than what we're faced with. Because we're having such competing laws at different levels, and you've seen it from the inside at ICE. We really have to make sure that we're numbers as a collective moving this forward.
Cynthia, you bring up an excellent point. You know, this is not yet, we were here today to talk about the issues that we've seen with the deferred action process since the application became open 2 weeks ago, and the various tips or issues that we've seen. But I think what you've brought up is just unbelievably important point, and that is, if there are U.S. citizens in your home, in your family, or your friends who are U.S. citizens, anyone you know, the power of the vote speaks volumes. We have to, if we want comprehensive immigration reform, we have to come together as people and vote for those individuals who are going to give us comprehensive immigration reform.
Precisely.
And certainly this is not a political forum, and we're not here to talk about politics, but I think it's absolutely crucial, because the deferred action process, the deferred action policy that was announced by the Obama administration, it is a benefit to the immigration community, but it is not a change in the law, and it does not afford these individuals legal status. And they don't necessarily they're not necessarily going to be part of, if you will, the plurality, because they're not going to be given any kind of legal status.
Right.
So we need to get them legal status.
Precisely. And what we're basically doing is allowing you an opportunity to potentially prove to us as American citizenry that you're willing to work and do it within the confines of the law. But it's a temporary 2-year permit. And there is still, as you know, we don't even have the renewal procedures out yet. So we need to understand how this is going to operate. And my humble opinion and my gut tells me that if we outnumber, if they propose, I think 1.5 million, we're going to actually apply for this and benefit of this. If we doubled that number, if we actually had on the roster, 2 million, 3 million individuals who qualified and were going to be given this temporary status, then that shows that we as a country are failing one of the most important policy pieces that we must address. And that's where I'm coming from as a lawyer, and I suppose you're right, we're not activists here, but we have to make sure people understand the way the law works, the way policy is made, and without those 3 branches of government working in concert, this country doesn't go forward. So
absolutely,
this is key.
And the power is in your voice.
Precisely.
And in numbers. The more numbers, the more powerful your voice.
Precisely.
Well, Cynthia, I thank you for coming and joining me today. And if you have any further questions, you can contact me at Patricia.M.Coralles@gmail.com, and you can contact my colleague, Cynthia Carrasco. Cynthia, again, can you give us your information where they contact you?
My website is CynthiaNatalieCarrasco.com, and feel free to email me directly at cncesq@gmail.com. And I speak Spanish fluently like Patricia does, so we definitely have access to the community.
Fantastic. Gracias por venir.
A usted, gracias.
Okay.